Well, Brian, now we got to talk about something that's not as entertaining as the writer's complaints, which is the new lawsuit filed against Vince McMahon, Linda McMahon, the WWE, and parent company TKO Group Holdings. And there's been a lot of coverage of this. We're looking at articles from the New York Post, articles from CNN. But basically, the 5 former ring boys claim they were exploited and sexually abused during their time working for the wrestling giant, while scandal-scarred ex-CEO Vince McMahon did nothing to stop it. According to the New York Post, the men, who were underage boys at the time of the alleged abuse, filed suit anonymously at a Maryland court against McMahon, 79, his wife Linda, and WWE parent company TKO Group Holdings. But I've seen in another report they're suing WWE and TKO. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the way I thought I saw it too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same thing. We're suing another arm of the same Medusa or whatever.
The thing that makes it a little different is obviously Vince and Linda McMahon were in charge when it happened. They ran the WWE when it happened. This all happened under the WWE's auspices. However, TKO didn't even exist at that time.
That's the first thing I was going to ask you. How I can understand how they can sue Vince and Linda, and there's more than enough evidence to support that. And I can understand maybe how they could sue the WWE because it's the entity that exists today is kind of the entity that was existing then. But to sue TKO is sort of like if I go and buy a bakery from a guy and start running the bakery, and then somebody 30 years later comes to me, hey, the guy that used to run this bakery used to take me in a back room and do whatever, and fuck you, I'm suing you. How does that work?
I don't know. And obviously we'll find out as this, one way or another as this takes place. But,
is this another case of somebody's got a good case and a bad lawyer? Are they leaving themselves open for a loophole here?
I don't know enough to say that. And, based on what we know so far, I don't know if we could say that, but.
You don't want to say anything bad about any lawyers unless you know who they are first.
Well, no, because we really don't know. I mean, this all comes back to Mel Phillips. It's not like this is an unknown thing. When this story came out that these lawsuits were about to happen, it wasn't like it's out of left field. Like, this is stuff we've been hearing about publicly since 1991, 1992.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is an unknown thing. For those who don't know, Mel Phillips was a massive wrestling fan. He was actually WFIA Fan of the Year.
Was he really?
In like 73 or 74, yeah.
Thank goodness he predated my involvement in the organization.
Fan of the Year. And, he had friends who were the inside wrestling fans of the day. And then he somehow infiltrated the WWF. Specifically on those Philadelphia shows, he was the ring announcer at the Spectrum. He was a ring attendant. He apparently was helping organize the boys that would build the rings. And one thing that comes out in this latest round of Ring Boy stories is that Vince and Linda knew he had an issue with young boys, and they fired him over it. And then they rehired him.
And then brought him back.
Well, now he wasn't an employee. This goes to the whole employee independent contractor thing. He only worked for them. And he was their ring announcer. And he was on TV on Wrestling Challenge. Like, he wasn't an unknown face, but he wasn't an employee.
Well, and not only did he ring announce, like you said, the Philly house shows and some TV, but apparently he traveled to some of these Northeast towns and was in some way or another supervising or responsible for ring boys. We'll talk about that concept even in a second, who would help set up the ring in these various towns, and he would drive them or transport them to these towns. He would have them stay in the hotel room with him or in the hotels where he was staying and where I guess the wrestlers stayed. And obviously, they have pictures here in the New York Post of some of the things that he's accused of wrestling with these kids. And, he was furnished with a private locker room. I don't think he was furnished with one. I think that he would just go and find a goddamn room in the building somewhere that nobody else wanted. And that's what he would use. But, we've heard, yes, these things happened with this guy. Nobody is really disputing that I've heard. Maybe the company is now. But this article cites Vince McMahon telling Phil Mushnick in the 1980s that he and his wife knew that Phillips had a, quote, peculiar and unnatural interest in boys. And during a TV interview in 1993, Linda McMahon admitted that Phillips had a foot fetish, which was a running joke in the WWE. The McMahons actually fired Phillips in 1988 amid sexual abuse allegations, but within 6 weeks, they rehired him, warning him to steer clear from the kids.
At a time where WWE, more than any other time in its history, was marketing itself to kids.
Yes. And they say that the 5 plaintiffs met Phillips between 1981 and 1984. So this is even before the expansion. And, as you said, this really didn't start becoming a thing that got talked about publicly till the early 90s. But this was going on for some fucking period of time. But anyway, and we won't get into the rubbing the feet on the crotches and, the various accusations, but this guy was a fucking weirdo. But the same stories, he'd do something, drop the kid off at home and give him money. Or he would get him drunk and then get him front row seats or whatever, and then drop him off and give him money. But again, the point is, how can you sue TKO for for their part in buying a company 40 years after this took place? I think wouldn't this have to be a Vince and Linda, because she's on the record talking about it.
Even WWE, because Vince and Linda were executives of WWE. So, I mean, you could sue WWE and the 2 top executives because of their enabling of it, their whatever it may be. But WWE could be sued too. But TKO, just because they own WWE now, that seems like a bit of a stretch.
Bit of a stretch. But here's what's not a stretch is, why did this kind of shit ever go on? You asked me earlier before we went on the air, what was this? Did they have ring boys elsewhere? And
yeah, because you never hear about it. You only hear about it with WWE and the ring boy scandal.
Yes.
And, WWE had referees putting up rings. Ring boys, I guess, were helping them or just doing it themselves under Mel Phillips at that time. But what about everywhere else? Like, who was putting up the ring and were there ring boys?
Well, that's the thing is, this as a concept didn't exist anywhere else in fucking wrestling. The idea that the Stooge ring announcer would have autonomy to just recruit a bunch of underage kids and bring them to the show and put them to work setting up the ring and giving them tickets or seats or all this. I have never heard of any setup like this in any other wrestling promotion in the goddamn world. And that's why even when I first started hearing about it, in the 90s, the Donahue shows or whatever, I'm like, what the, how did this even become a thing? Because why would you want small underage boys to be carrying fucking 500-pound fucking steel ring posts or giant 20-foot fucking 1x2s, lumber, or the framework of the ring,
or just the responsibility of putting up the ring that everyone's going to be working in.
The responsibility of that. Why would you transport these people from out of town? What were their parents doing? Oh, you're going to go with this fucking shady looking guy out to Poughkeepsie. But no, in in every territory, things were different in terms of the ring setup. And I can tell you in the Tennessee territory, the regular towns, Memphis, Louisville, Evansville, Nashville, the towns that were run every week, they had their own ring in the building. Instead of hauling one, up and down the road and setting it up every week, you knew you were going to be there every week. There was a ring in the building. And in Louisville, it was the Louisville Gardens maintenance crew, old Alvin, and, some guys that he would find that would set up the ring before the boys even got there. And now, I saw him a few times, the guys he had helping him, and they were way long years away from seeing the sunny side of under 18 because it's heavy fucking metal and steel and lumber. And the idea was you wanted guys that could fucking help you. And in Evansville, same thing. Some people with the, oh, God damn it. What was the sponsor over the VFW post or whoever because in Indiana, you had to have a sponsor of an athletic event or a boxing wrestling thing that was with a civic organization. On the spot shows, it depended on who was running who was promoting the show. But Buddy Wayne, and not the Northwest Buddy Wayne that has family members in AEW, but the Memphis wrestler and promoter from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, Buddy Wayne, when he would promote a show, he had his own spot show ring and his own truck and his own trailer. And either he'd have a couple guys from Memphis that did it with him regularly that would ride up there with him, or the only time I ever saw any underage people putting up the ring was when his sons were doing it. I think he had Aubrey out there when he's like 4, but, what the fuck? It's a family business. No. And any other territory I can think of, Mid-South Wrestling, there's a lot more towns. They still had rings in a lot of those buildings that they were in all the time, but you had usually a crusty old son of a bitch that had a truck and a trailer, and they drove it, and they usually had helpers, and the ring crew's $200 or whatever the fuck. But and no promoter wanted his ring crew guy coming up saying, hey, I need a couple of tickets for these kids tell them sit out in the fucking general admission seats. We're not sold out. We're not putting them at ringside. What? The ring announcer is trying to bring miscellaneous ring boys into the locker room to meet the boys. That wouldn't have fucking flown. Much less him having his own fucking room.
Yeah, the whole thing about him having his own dressing room is a bit, if that's true in any way, that's fucking odd.
Well, no, again, that could have been a fucking broom closet in the arena. Because, even some of the guys that really need a dressing room sometimes dress in a broom closet in the arena. But
what about, maybe I'm remembering this wrong, you will know. Wasn't it Bobby Eaton, a story that, he first got in, helping set up the ring?
Yes, and that's another thing, that kids sometimes would hang around the back of the arena trying to run errands or something to get in if they couldn't afford to get in. And Bobby, big kid, when he was 15, still 6 feet tall, 200 pounds or whatever, yeah, you can carry some shit. Okay, we'll let you in to watch the matches if you help us put the ring up. And that wasn't unusual, but at the same time, this was in a high school gym where everybody was in probably the same locker room. You couldn't have privacy in these type of situations, and nobody was trying. I don't understand why this became a thing that was even allowed in this company to begin with, when that certainly didn't go on anywhere else. And you asked me earlier also, well, were there boys hanging around? Pat Malone had boys in Memphis. You know what he did? He's like, hey, boy, come here. He'd see some kids. They could be 9 years old. He didn't matter. Boy, come here. Take these 10 magazines. Go out and sell them. Bring me the money back. I'll give you $1. If Pat Malone was 80 years old and you do a fuck with Pat Malone and he wasn't going to be diddling any kids, right? But that's how the kids got to see the fucking matches. if they sold their 10 programs or 10 magazines or whatever and brought him the money back. But this is just insane. I've never been in a territory, I didn't work everywhere, but I'd never been in a territory where they wanted to bring small children in from out of town to help set up the fucking ring. And it was never attempted or brought up or pitched in any way, as far as I know.
So again, to go back to the lawsuit, with Vince and Linda, again, as whatever Vince was at that time, the CEO of WWE or WWF, Titan Sports, actually.
Yeah.
And Linda eventually took over that role when Vince got into legal trouble, but she had a top position before then. Why did they put up with this guy and rehire him? There's no good excuse for it. Terry Garvin, also was accused of fucking around with ring boys, or trying to. That's where the whole Tom Cole thing started.
Yeah.
It was Terry Garvin.
And I believe it was Terry Garvin. See, here's the thing. They don't have Vince and Linda saying these things between 1981 and 1984. They have them saying these things in the late 80s, early 90s. And I'm thinking, because they did rely on Terry Garvin for stuff, and we know what Terry Garvin was doing. And apparently we know what Mel Phillips was doing. I'm thinking, did they being Vince and Linda, were they just unaware of what the fuck was going on, nor give a shit about the ring or the ring setup, or they got other fish to fry or other things going on? And then they start finding out about it and they go, shit, fuck. Tell this guy to get the fuck out of here. And then he begs to Garvin, and Garvin maybe have come back and said, oh, bring him back. He'll be okay. And then all the shit hits the fan. But I don't know.
They went into business together. I saw the business cards once. After they got fired by WWE, Garvin was an employee, I believe. Oh, actually, I don't even know if that's the case. He was an agent. He was a producer, but I don't know I don't remember exactly. But him and Mel Phillips got fired, and they started another wrestling company. It didn't do anything. Like in New England. Know that. Yeah, they did something in New England. I saw the business cards one day.
But see, that's the thing, in hindsight, when Gorilla Monsoon would make the joke, well, he went behind him. He must have gone to the Terry Garvin School of Defense or School of Self-Defense. It looks bad. Everybody knew about Terry, but nobody knew. Well, I won't say nobody. Everybody knew about Terry Garvin, but not a lot of people knew about what Terry Garvin and Mel Phillips were doing with these kids.
But that's the thing, too. Terry Garvin, it wasn't just Terry Garvin would sexually harass wrestlers as well as kids. With Mel Phillips, there's never been a wrestler that said that Mel Phillips tried to do anything. It's all kids.
I don't think Mel Phillips had the fucking guts for that one. But anyway, the point is that now that they've made all these jokes and they've said these things, Vince and Linda, they've buried themselves, because whether they knew when it was going on or whether they found out later on and just didn't do enough to fucking put an end to it until they had to, they pretty much buried themselves, not only with they have pictures of Mel Phillips with these ring boys wrestling and ring boys holding belts. And, again, these kids are not anybody that you would want to try to have carry a ring post. It's a complete bullshit scam. So I think they're fucked.
And according to this, Phillips would strike up conversations with boys outside of the arenas before WWE events, and he would cruise their neighborhoods carrying WWE Championship belts before inviting them to events. Then the sick man would abuse them, sometimes traveling with the kids to events in different states. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
And staying with them in hotel rooms.
That's the thing, he was a fucking whacked out pedophile that they knew about, got rid of, and then rehired. That's the thing that's the most questionable. There's no good reason for it. And then what? Turn the blind eye?
It's not like this guy was fucking, Michael Buffer or something as a ring announcer and is indispensable to the company.
He was a shitty ring announcer too. And he was there another 3 years, and he was still abusing boys during that period of time. It wasn't like he's like, okay, I'm reformed now. No, I mean, They still shouldn't have rehired him, but they did. I mean, that's the thing that gets me. Why would they rehire this guy? It ended up costing them a lot in bad publicity. In a lot of respects, they got away with everything, but it hurt the company for a while. And you would have to know that it would hurt the company if you brought the guy back. And they still did it. It's so weird that they did.
And I start thinking about if the same situation was to present its head in Louisville, Kentucky, with Christine Sherritt around. My God, I never saw her get violent, but she would have run this guy out of the building in 15 minutes, much less 10 years with a goddamn stick in her hand. And she would have let everybody know, from Jerry to Lawler to anybody that would listen, that that person was never to be around the fucking building again. But yeah, no, ring boys didn't, again, kids that wanted to get in the back, that were hanging around the back of the building, whether it be a high school gym in Tullahoma, Tennessee, or the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum. Yeah, sell some programs, bring me the money back, I'll let you watch the matches. Or occasionally on a spot show where there's going to be a couple hundred people there and they got one stooge helper for the ring guy and he wants some help. Yeah, I'll let you in. You can see the matches. Carry this ring post. But as far as an organized recruiting system or people traveling back and forth, what the fuck? No. Because no promoter would have paid them. And if they were doing it for free, riding around with this guy from whoever or from wherever, somebody would have asked about it.
So when did the referee start putting up the rings for WWF or WWE?
I don't know for sure when that would have started, because I was surprised when I got there in 1993. That was the deal. Every referee except for Earl Hebner and Timmy White, who had seniority, and, they were the top main event referees. Everybody else was part of the ring crew. They drove the ring truck. They helped set up the ring. And I was like, fuck, a company this big and the referees have to do double duty and are not only putting the ring up, but are driving this fucking truck hundreds of miles from place to place. That's odd. But maybe that's what they came up with after their previous system was so obviously a fucking failure. But no, every territory had guys with a pickup truck and a trailer or a old U-Haul truck or something, and they had their own.
Oh, yeah. I met the guy at Smoky Mountain Fan Week who was the genius behind Smoky Mountain, according to him. What was his name? Harold?
Oh, Harold Varner.
He was really the guy. He knew everything about Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Yeah. He and D'Lo Brown were quite good friends when they were riding in the truck together.
Oh, boy.
But that's the thing, is some fucking redneck with a couple of stooges in a fucking truck. It's going to either that or the actual promoter of the spot show himself. Paul Morton, Ricky's father, used to haul rings. But it was always somebody that was involved with the promotion and or their regular stooge helpers that they gave $25 to or $50 to or whatever the thing was, come right up to this town and fucking set up this ring. And then in modern years, it's become the wrestlers. Instead of, hey, kids hanging around the back door, if you want to get in and see the matches, help set the ring up. It's, hey, wrestlers, you're lucky to be booked on the show, so set the ring up first and try to earn your money.
And now it's, hey, kids hanging around here at the back. You want to work?
Yeah. Now
you got a mask?
Mel Phillips would be getting them on the TV to do jobs now. But anyway, I'm thinking Vince better be glad he got that $2 billion. And I don't know how Linda's fixed these days. I assume she's fairly well off, but they might, if this lawyer has anything going on at all, they might need some fucking money. But I don't see how they're going to get away with TKO being involved in this when they bought a company 35 years after it took place.
That's the only other question I have, is just about the time frame, because obviously what happened to these kids is awful, and there should be, someone's got to pay. But this is 35 years ago, and give or take, even longer. I mean, the kids who met him in the early 80s, we're talking 40 years ago. That's the only thing I don't know if that.
Why did they wait this long? Right? Because
either that or they waited so long that there's only so much that could be. I mean, Mel Phillips has been dead for over a decade. Terry Garvin's been dead for a while. You know what I mean? Like, there's only Vince McMahon is a shell of himself from what we've seen publicly.
But that shell has $2 billion hanging around his neck. But yeah, you can't say, well, they just did it now that TKO owns it, because there's money there now, because the WWE has been $1 billion company for a while. Did they pass a law in New York, one of those laws that the statute of limitations, as some people say, has run out?
Well, do we know where this took place? I don't remember. Did it get filed in New York, this lawsuit?
Well, hold on. Let's go back up to the top and see if they gave us this. It was written up in the New York Post.
CNN says Baltimore, for the byline at least.
Well, you know what? They were
filed in Baltimore County, Maryland.
Yes, because remember, they were doing TV production in post-production, editing, etc. in Baltimore at that time period.
Until they opened up the new studio. That's right. They did it there until 88.
Well, and now, of course, the New York Post has frozen my screen, so I can't move anything and I can't get out of this.
Well, this will be interesting, and it's another egg in the Vince McMahon, Phil Mushnick feud basket. We'll see where this goes next, but that's the Ring Boy story. We'll follow up on this whenever there's something.
Well, I'm not going to refer to any more of this particular website either as well, because what you did to me earlier in the day, Brian, before the program, I'm not going to forget about that. If it hadn't been for our friends at ExpressVPN that I mentioned earlier, why, this pirate website that you sent me to could have come through the walls and taken over my all of my being here.
See, you should have used ExpressVPN. It was your problem. Your fault.
Well, no, I've got ExpressVPN.
You made the mistake.
They protected me from being hacked and encrypted and glossed over and fucking smashed and tunneled and etc. All the things that people do, but you can't go to these off-brand websites, and now that's a whole nother thing. But I'll tell you what, going without ExpressVPN is like. It's like leaving your door unlocked when you leave your house. You're not protecting your things. It's like leaving your laptop unattended at the coffee shop or wine bar or local dive tavern. It's like leaving your kids with the nearest stranger. It's like walking down the street wearing only women's underwear.
What are these examples? Where are you getting these from?
I guess it's not like that.
Yeah, not really.
Well, but if you do the other things, you're probably more likely to do that. But going online without ExpressVPN is like doing all those things. You're not being protected. You're not being secure. You're not being safe. That's why that they say, do you know what the ExpressVPN says? They say that hackers can make up to $1,000 a person selling personal information on the dark web. You, Brian Last, and each one of your minions there at Last Manor could be worth $1,000 a piece. With as many kids as you got, they could come up with fucking 10 or 12 grand.
I'm sure I'm worth a lot more than that.
Well, that's on the black market now. You do have to mark these things. I'm sure you could get $2,500 retail.
What about on the green market?
Well, on the green market, you're going to have to install solar panels first. But it doesn't take much technical knowledge to hack somebody. But once you've got ExpressVPN on the case, it would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years, to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. So you got to have a dedicated son of a bitch that is willing to work 1 billion years to make $1,000. I think we can all agree with that, can't we, Brian?
No, I mean, we could all agree with what?
Well, we could all agree that you'd be a complete, just blithering idiot to work 1,000,000,000 years to make $1,000.
You can't live 1,000,000,000 years, so that the whole example doesn't make any sense.
You can't live on $1,000 either. So it proved my point.
There was some woman in the paper today. She's 107 years old. She has a horn growing out of her head.
Well, what does that have to do with being encrypted on the internet?
I'm saying you're not going to live to be 1,000,000,000. Imagine how many horns you'd have.
I think you could have those things removed at a regular interval by a qualified plastic surgeon. And as a matter of fact, if you do, then ExpressVPN will protect your information from being outed as an ex-horn person that was dehornified and is no longer horny.
That's not what they do. They don't deal with the horny. Let's get back to what they do. ExpressVPN.
Well, a lot of people on the internet are horny, I'll have you know. But folks, it works on all your devices, phones, laptops, tablets, and more, so you can stay secure. You can carry some of these things around with you. You know, the portable things that you see people in the coffee shops. A lot of people mention coffee shops. You see people on these things, the screens and everything that they carry around with them. It works on them too. And they're out there in public. You're just waving those around in front of God and everybody. So Lord knows that needs some protection. What if you have pictures of your nether regions as a screensaver on your device when you're sitting at the coffee shop, just idly sipping an espresso, and there's Wally and the Beaver out there for all to see?
Why would someone have their own genitalia as their screensaver?
Well, maybe they're proud of it.
Not even someone else's, their own?
Well, you never know. It depends on what they look like.
Do you tell the person sitting next to you, no, excuse me, don't worry, it's mine?
Well, yeah, I think that's the polite thing to say. Elsewise, they'll think you're weird. But ExpressVPN is rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. If you've ever been on The Verge, you'll know that they're #1. And so, at any rate, right now, folks, secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/JCE. That is expressvpn.com/JCE. You're going to get an extra 3 months free. So, how much would it cost you to hire a bodyguard for 3 months? You're going to be protected for 3 months for free if you use the / of JCE, expressvpn.com/JCE. And of course, as I told you, Brian, earlier, I got the custom service where the guy comes over a couple times a week and he fiddles with the connections on my internet. He makes sure that everything's plugged in tight. And he takes a large light and he looks behind the computer, make sure everything's okay there. And then there's a series of exercises that I have to go through where he wants to make sure that no signal has come from the computer to invade my body. Of course, I'm doing this naked because we're in the sauna. But it's a whole thorough thing.
You did tell me this before, and as I told you before, that person is not from ExpressVPN. I don't. He's got
it written right across his shirt in Sharpie. ExpressVPN.
I'm thinking maybe it's someone else, or you get some other problems. But ExpressVPN, ladies and gentlemen, don't worry about anyone coming to your house. That's one of the things that they promise.
Well, they won't be able to find you.
One more time, promo code Jim.
expressvpn.com/JCE.